Hi folks, I'm Pierre Morand and welcome to the Physical Education Podcast, where we're going to be delving deep into all the mind-body aspects of chronic pain. I'm going to be asking those questions that dive deeper into your personality and who you are, and asking why are you still in pain. So perhaps you've tried everything, you've been to all the experts, you've embarked on this journey of understanding your health, and you're doing, quote, all the right things, yet you're not getting better. And so the question is, why not? This was my experience. I was this person. I was trying everything. So why wasn't I getting better? What's going on? What's missing? And that's what we're going to aim to uncover in this podcast in general, and in particular with today's episode. We're going to be exploring the topic of limiting beliefs and whether or not they are holding you back and sabotaging your recovery. We're going to look at why beliefs are relevant to your pain and how they shape our behaviors and habits. We're going to discuss the different types of limiting beliefs and how they might show up in your life, and most importantly, what you can do about them to finally make some meaningful progress. Okay, so I often wonder about why chronic pain is still such an issue. You know, we've never had more therapists, more remedies, more gadgets, medical procedures, therapies, or healthcare professionals than ever. And we've never had as much knowledge about health as we do today. But I also find that the cause of your pain is usually fairly straightforward, as long as we ask the right questions and do the right assessments. But in spite of all this, in spite of everything we have, we don't have a proportionate reduction in chronic pain cases. And I think at some point we need to face the facts and acknowledge that something is missing. And this goes for pretty much all major and common health issues. For example, obesity, heart disease, stress, depression, and so on. The solutions are known to us and they are available. And most of it is freely available if you're willing and able to take the time to look into it. So with this in mind, the question becomes, why don't we take appropriate action to resolve our problems? When we know what to do and we've been clearly shown the path to recovery, why don't we follow through with it? So, for example, if your doctor tells you your weight and lack of activity are endangering your life, why don't you follow through with your diet and exercise plan? Why do we give up our New Year's resolutions a couple of weeks into January? Obviously, there are a number of reasons for this, and I'm not going to get into all of them today. But one that I feel is under-recognized is the influence of limiting beliefs in our lives. Simply put, our beliefs don't align with our goals, and so our behaviors don't allow us to attain these goals. Because most of our behaviors are unconscious. As we go about our day-to-day lives, we're not thinking consciously about every little interaction and every little thing we do. So let's use a blunt, sort of really clear example. So suppose that for your whole life, you felt and were made to feel worthless. You have no confidence in your own value, and this is visible in the way you carry yourself. It's visible in your posture and the way you speak. It's visible in the way you occupy space and enter a room. It's tangible in your presence. And these are all physical manifestations of what's going on in your mind, and they influence your interactions. If you go for a job interview, perhaps you don't come across as competent because you lack confidence, or you sell yourself short, or you downplay your strengths and achievements. Maybe you struggle to take compliments and so on. Even if this doesn't sound like you likely know or have come across someone who practically displays their limiting beliefs in all of their actions. And I use this as a really obvious and clear example. My point is that every little micro decision you make and interaction you have on a daily basis shapes your life. Most of these decisions are not consciously decided. They're automatic. And if they're automatic, then they're going to be based on what you believe to be true. So going back to our previous example of someone with low self-worth, suppose they are asked by their boss to work at the weekend, their automatic response may be to just say yes, without a thought for their own plans or their own well-being. And maybe maybe they had things to do, but without any real consideration, and because on some deep level they believe their needs and desires aren't important, they appease their boss and automatically agree to work. And there are books written about this. I think a book called The Power of No, and it's just that power of boundaries, and why don't we have boundaries, and where does that come from? And so going back to this hypothetical case, then perhaps this person, it becomes resentful to their boss for asking them to work, but then they're also resentful towards themselves for having agreed without thinking about it first, or without standing their ground, and so on. And this continues to spiral. Now, at the same time, due to their lack of self-worth, they may never pluck up the courage to negotiate a raise or promotion in their job, and perhaps resenting others who do get promotions but never agreed to work extra days as much as they did, and on and on. So perhaps there's someone else in the office who doesn't come in at the weekends because they simply say no, and they have clear boundaries, but they ask for a raise and they ask for a promotion and they get it. Meanwhile, this person doesn't, and it becomes this whole kind of spiral of resentment and negative emotions. So most of our decisions are unconscious, and because of this, they're filtered through our unconscious beliefs, which are shaped by our past experiences and by our environment. They're shaped by our family dynamics, by our peers, by our idols, our place in society, our place in the various hierarchies of society. They're based on our successes, our failures, and then the meaning that we ascribe to these successes and failures. And essentially, our unconscious beliefs are shaped by our lives. They're shaped by what we hear repeatedly, what we're told repeatedly. Don't do that, you can't do that, you can't achieve that, all that sort of stuff. And it builds up and it becomes what we filter our thoughts through. So now you might be inclined to worry that this means that these unconscious beliefs are out of your control, but they are ultimately your beliefs. They are your thoughts, and it's your mind and your body. Obviously, things outside of you will have influenced their development, but ultimately the control lies with you, which continues to be an important theme of the content I produce. And it's the ownership and control of your body needs to be yours. You need to be more invested and in tune than anyone else, because no one can know you or influence your health better than you can. So our lives are shaped and influenced by these beliefs, and things likely won't change until we address things at this level. And there's a great quote by Jung, the psychoanalyst, that describes this quite nicely, and he says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And you know, if you find yourself wondering why aren't you getting better in spite of your best efforts, then it's likely that you need to dig a little deeper and see what is keeping you stuck. And that was a major thing for me. Again, a lot of what I share is based on my experience of 15 years of pain, and realizing that, yes, it wasn't my fault that I ended up in pain in the first place, but it's up to me to get myself out of it. And again, it's not about blame, but it's just about facing the facts and then realizing that you might be keeping yourself in pain. It's not always the case, but it's very often the case. And I think if there's resistance to that idea, that could be a good indication that you might want to consider it, because if you're resisting it, then there's something uncomfortable about it. Whereas, you know, if you accept it, you get to a point where, yes, I had a role to play in my pain and in sustaining my pain, and that's something I can recognize now. It doesn't have this power over me. I can say, yeah, this lasted this long because of me, because of things I kept saying to myself. Yes, it was put into my head maybe by someone else, but I kept saying it to myself, and it was up to me to change that. So pay attention to what you're thinking at this stage. Are you kind of maybe put off by this idea, or do you feel maybe a bit offended, which would be an interesting and very common reaction. So just observe that and use that as a clue. So let's talk a bit about the kinds of unconscious beliefs that may be holding back your recovery, and then how to identify them. because, as the name suggests, they are unconscious, so you likely don't even realize their presence or their relevance. So I'm going to the first way you want to sort of identify limiting beliefs is to look for excuses you're making in your daily life. So really common ones are: I don't have time to go to the gym, I don't have time to do that, I don't feel like doing that, I'm not going to do the exercises. That's a good one. I've actually heard that a few times. People come into the clinic for treatment and they tell you outright, even from the start, look, don't give me any exercises because I'm not going to do them, which is really interesting because I've never seen any case that didn't require some sort of effort from the person in pain, some sort of exercise, be it physical or written or mental. And these people are saying outright, look, I'm not going to do that. And so you're wondering, well, why not? Don't you want to get better? You're coming to me, or you're going to someone for help and you're paying for help, and you're not going to actually, you're not going to apply that information and do the exercises. That's very interesting. And maybe you've felt that, or maybe you've said, oh, I'll do them, but you don't actually do the exercises. You don't hold your end of the bargain. And where does that come from? What's really going on? So some other ones would be, I can't stick to that program, I can't do that, I'm not that kind of person, I'm not flexible at all. People say that a lot. It's what they believe from their young age. I'm clumsy, I'm not flexible, and they just repeat that to themselves, and so that's the life they live. They're not flexible because they've decided already that they're not flexible. Other ones like, I don't want to change my diet, I don't want to meditate, I couldn't sit still for all that time. That's another common one, not being able or willing to just sit down and do nothing. Why don't you want to sit with your own thoughts? Why can't you stop doing things? Why do you constantly need to be doing things, maybe constantly distracting yourself? What's going on there? And these are generally gateways into deeper reasons. If you don't have time to engage in certain things, like if you don't have time to go to the gym, or if you feel you're not the type of person who can do these things, you should ask yourself why. Why don't you have the time? And there are always going to be some reasonable excuses for why you can't realistically commit to something. But you can often do more than you think. So dig into these questions. Why can't you do this? Is it that you can't? Is it that you legitimately can't? Or is it that you won't, that it's not a priority? And then continue to chase that a bit deeper. So look for excuses in your life. Look for qualifying statements. No, I can't do that. Oh, I don't like that. No, that's not for me. All that kind of stuff. All these, essentially anything that brings up a negative emotion. You're asked to do something, some criticism is said to you, and you can't take it constructively, and you kind of react somewhat irrationally, like it really bothers you, or you have some sort of reason why that doesn't apply to you, or you can't do that. Start from there and then begin to ask these questions. Where does this come from? Why am I saying this? And continue to chase that a bit deeper and see, is there a pattern of experiences in your life that are consistent with this issue? So for example, if you can never follow through on a program and you always give up before it's done, which is, that's a really, really common thing. Adherence to an exercise program is really, really uncommon. And so you might ask yourself, has that been a consistent pattern in your life? And if so, where might that come from? Were you taught or shown the value of following through on a plan and showing self-integrity? Or did your parents display the same lack of focus, lack of structure, and the inability to stick to a plan? And it doesn't have to be your parents, of course. It could be any significant person that you've looked up to. The point is, have you ever had any real and meaningful frame of reference for self-integrity? Were you taught to be true to your word? And this is a really, really common one. And it is basically that, we didn't learn how to actually follow through because our models, perhaps our parents, showed the same issues. They couldn't follow through on something. They always quit, or they maybe didn't try their best, so they gave up too easily. And you absorb that. And it's not about blaming them. It's about just recognizing, okay, so that was what they did, but I'm a different person. I can do things differently because it's It's my mind, it's my body, it's up to me to do things differently. But you have to recognize it, because that influence happens without you even realizing it, and you need to put a stop to it. So then, another example is if you've always had a tendency to put others ahead of yourself. And I've talked about this a lot, but you may ask yourself if you are a natural caregiver who always puts others ahead of yourself. Now, do you consistently ignore your own needs in favor of those of others? And where does this come from? Obviously, if you're a parent, it's obvious and understandable where that comes from. It's your job and instinct as a parent. But maybe you could dig deeper. Do you have a reason to believe that you might not deserve to be looked after? Is there a pattern of this in your life? And you can chase that down and continue to uncover the root of these issues. And that was a major one for me, is never really putting myself first. I always had solutions for other people. I always loved helping people, and a major reason why I came into this kind of work is helping people, but sometimes to the detriment of my own health and looking after myself and following my own advice. So I could give the advice, but I wouldn't necessarily follow it, and you can chase that down. And I won't go into the reasons, but there were family reasons, there were significant experiences that all sort of reinforced that kind of selflessness, and being selfless is a virtue and that sort of thing. So another common issue I see a lot is when a person can't actually see themselves in better health. So they can't visualize themselves without the pain, or they can't visualize themselves as a more health conscious person. And this could be that they've become so used to being in pain that it's familiar, and familiarity can offer a sense of safety. It may also be that they can't see themselves acting like a healthy person. So going to the gym or being active or going on a hike or playing a sport or whatever it is, they can't see it, or they feel like they're not that person. And the example I use a lot is that Arnold Schwarzenegger, if he walks into a gym and he doesn't question whether or not he belongs there. He's Arnold Schwarzenegger. He walks into a gym. I mean, I'm assuming, but it's quite likely that he walks into a gym, feels completely at ease. He knows how everything works. He knows he fits in. This is his world, and when you walk into a gym, how do you feel? Do you feel intimidated? Do you feel out of place? Do you feel like everyone's watching you, like you don't fit in? And it's not just the gym. It could be anything, because we create identities, and we buy into, we call them tribes. You're the CrossFitter, you're the gardener, you're the, you go for brunch, whatever it is. Like, it could be anything. And you sort of identify with that, and you're that kind of person, and you look like that kind of person. So when you're in that world, you fit in. And maybe be like someone. Maybe if I rocked up to like 5-star, 3 Michelin star restaurant like this, and maybe I'd come from a poor background and I was told I was worthless, maybe I wouldn't feel too comfortable because I'm underdressed, and then also I feel like these people are better than me. It's that sort of thing. Or do you feel like you fit in? Do you feel comfortable? And all that sort of stuff. And the point is, ultimately, is your view of yourself and the person you are at odds with the person you need to be to get better. So if I say you need to do mobility, you need to do this kind of stuff, that might be at odds with how you see yourself, and it might be at odds with what you think is possible. So if you need to follow a daily mobility program, to go to sleep at 10, to not spend time on social media, to detach yourself from these stresses of work, to prioritize your own needs and have time for yourself, do these things sound like you? Oh, that's not me. You'll say, oh, that's not for me. I can't do that. That's when these things come in. So do these things sound like you? What you essentially the bridge to recovery. Does that sound like you? The actions you need to take to make it to a point of recovery. Do those actions sound like something that you could do? Or are they completely at odds with your personality? And if so, ask yourself why. where does this come from? And another interesting consideration is if you judge or look down on these things. You see this a lot, and the easy example again is going to the gym. Do you look down on people who care about their health? And does that seem vain? Does that seem self-important? Do you make fun of people who are health conscious? And obviously, I'm sure there are times there are reasons to make fun of these people. It's perfectly reasonable, but that might be a mirror reflecting back inadequacies of your own. And like I said, I've seen this a lot. You make fun of people who are health conscious, but maybe you don't feel too good about your health, and because of that, you feel like you couldn't really fit in. You couldn't really comfortably go to a gym and participate in that whole world. So, if you associate the pursuit of health with vanity, this may be at odds with your own pursuit of recovery, and it may prevent you from fully committing to a solution. And you may consider whether you think it seems selfish to look after yourself or to focus on yourself. That's a theme we see a lot. It's this idea that materialism is bad and materialism is materialism. Being into appearances, it's neither good nor bad. It's, it can have some positives and have some negatives. And what is your automatic reaction? Do you automatically think it's bad, or do you think it's nuanced? Do you think it's down to the context and to the individual? So that's the way you can begin to recognize these things. And so, like, going back to this idea that being selfish is or being self-important or being selfish is bad. A really easy example is when you're in a plane. You have those sheets that tell you what to do in an emergency, and you're supposed to put your own oxygen mask on first, because you can look after other people better if you look after yourself first, because you're in a better state, particularly if you're a parent. You look after your children, while you may want to prioritize your children, but you prioritize them by looking after yourself first. And the quote I use a lot is, "You can't pour from an empty cup." And you see all of this in a lot of areas of life. For example, in high altitude mountaineering, like in the Himalayas, rescue missions. I talk about this a lot recently. I'm really into it at the moment. But rescue missions, if someone dies, you don't necessarily retrieve their body, because it could be too dangerous, and you might kill a rescuer or a group of rescuers by trying to remove one body that's dead. So that's why, as far as I know, if you go up Mount Everest, you will find bodies that are just frozen, and they're just there off the path, and they're not removed because it's too dangerous, and also because I'm pretty sure they can't bring helicopters up there, but that's another issue. Also, I've heard about lifeguard rescuing out at sea. If the person is being wild and thrashing the water and perhaps harming you because they're in shock, you might need to knock them across the head and make them unconscious to then save them, or say, "Look, unless you calm down, I'm not going to save you," because you need to look after yourself, because if you die, you can't save them. And if you live, even if they die, at least you're still alive, and if you live, you have a better chance of saving them. So, being selfish isn't inherently bad. So you need to think about the meaning you've given to the word selfish. So hopefully you have a sense of the ways in which you may be holding yourself back. Now we can talk about solutions. Obviously, depending on the severity, the depth, and the significance of the issue, you may need to consider working with a professional. Sometimes you can uncover some pretty challenging and traumatic experiences that have been driving these beliefs, and with this in mind, you'll have to use your own judgment. I can't make that decision for you, but you'll know yourself. Like, if you think about something and it's instantly overwhelming, then maybe you need to work with a professional, because this is serious stuff. Now, if you feel comfortable to work through these on your own, I'm going to discuss some solutions, and they'll also be included in the resources link in the description of this episode. So you can just listen for now, and you can get the resources then if you want them written down and you want to go through them one by one. So personally, I recommend a Going back to my script. Like I said in a previous episode, I'm using a script because I tend to ramble otherwise, and it keeps things more concise. So, now in some cases, simply becoming aware of a limiting belief is enough to overcome it. So, once you're aware of it, once you notice that pattern, you notice when it creeps in, and then you simply act differently. It's simple enough. But sometimes it requires more digging, it requires you to go deeper. And for this, again, if you feel comfortable doing it yourself without working with a professional, personally, I recommend a mixture of writing and self-expression for addressing these beliefs. So I work through them one by one, and I ask a series of questions. So these are the questions I would go through. I'm going to list them, and again, these are in the resources section. So the first question is, what are your current beliefs about blank? So what do you say about blank? So for example, selfishness. What are your current beliefs about selfishness? And you would just write, I feel selfishness is bad, all that sort of stuff. It could be brief, it could be long. And then you ask yourself, where did these beliefs come from? So then you start to dig and say, okay, well, I was always told that or maybe it was always modeled to you, your family always put, for me, my mother always put everyone ahead of herself. And I never really thought of selfishness as being overtly bad, but I think on some level, well, being selfish is bad, and it's better to be selfless. So where did these beliefs come from? And start to dig into that. And then, what has experience told you about blank, about selfishness, for example? What experiences have reinforced the idea that selfishness is bad? And there might be key events, or there might be just patterns, just habitual patterns in your day-to-day life growing up that really reinforce that, or things that you saw, or things that you experienced. Now, the next question is, what are the stories you're telling yourself about overcoming blank, overcoming this belief? So overcoming the belief that selfishness is bad. You're just, again, going into why you believe selfishness is bad, and why you think it might be hard to overcome that belief. And then, do these beliefs align with what you want? And will they help you get to the finish line? So again, this example, believing that selfishness is inherently bad, how does that align with what you want? So maybe you're in pain because you've always put everyone ahead of yourself. You've never really looked after yourself. You've never really valued your own health on some level, and maybe you don't really you feel like you deserve to get better. So you believe that selfishness is bad. And so if you continue to believe that selfishness is bad, how is that going to impact your recovery? How is that, that's likely going to prevent you from getting better, because you're constantly going to be thinking, oh no, I won't do this for myself. I won't look after myself. I won't get that massage. I won't take the afternoon off. I won't, appease my friends and just stay in and just do what I want, or say no to the boss who wants me to work overtime. So then you ask yourself, what will it cost you to continue to hold on to these beliefs? Where will you end up if you continue to hold on to these beliefs, and what will it prevent you from doing in the future? And this is very much about painting, Jordan Peterson, the psychologist, talks about painting a hell to avoid. If you continue doing what you're doing, if you continue to believe that selfishness, for example, is inherently bad, what's going to happen in the future? And it's likely that either things will continue to get worse, or things will continue to be bad. They won't get better, because you're going to continue living out your life in this way. So you want to sort of outline that, what is at stake here. Make it very clear, because it's very easy to just keep doing these things in your day-to-day life, because it's all these little influences that you can just kind of ignore. But in a year, it's the same or it's worse. In 5 years, it's the same or worse. 10 years, and so on. And then you want to ask yourself, what does holding onto this belief protect you from? So how is it serving you, and how does it help you? Because these beliefs, your unconscious mind believes them for a reason. It has a use for them. It believes they're valuable in some way. So what does it protect you from? So again, going back to this belief of selfishness, maybe belief that selfishness is inherently bad. Maybe you don't want to appear selfish because people that you look up to point out that selfishness is bad, or that you don't want to seem self-important, you don't want to seem vain, you don't want to seem selfish. What is that protecting you from? So if you're always selfless, then no one can criticize you. Are you afraid of judgment? And that can be then another rabbit hole, the fear of judgment. Where does that come from? Do you feel you hate being seen, being looked at, being criticized, and you need to be comfortable being present in the world? And again, rabbit holes upon rabbit holes and so on, but it's extremely interesting. I love this stuff. So what does holding on to this belief protect you from? And how is it serving you? What are you gaining? What is the secondary gain? What is the gain from believing that selfishness is inherently bad, or whatever belief you select? And then, are these beliefs, is this belief absolutely true? Are they facts, or do they simply appear to be true most of the time? And so this is where we really get into the solution. You want to be the lawyer who pokes hole in the case and exposes the truth. Can you find exceptions and counter evidence? And you've probably seen enough Judge Judy and Boston Legal and The Good Wife. That's a law drama. You've probably seen enough of those that and they go up and they poke holes in the story. And so again, going back to this idea of selfishness is inherently bad. Okay, well, when is selfishness actually good? Okay, when you're on a plane and it's about to crash, you put your oxygen mask on first so that you can look after the person next to you. You can take care of your child to the best of your ability. So selfishness in this instance is good. If you're rescuing someone, there's no point you dying and not being able to rescue them. So look after yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. So begin to see, the counter evidence, the proof that sometimes being selfish is good. Sometimes whatever belief you have that's holding you back, sometimes it's not true. Sometimes the opposite is true, and you need to be able to recognize that. And then with the final question, you want to figure out what beliefs you need to reach your goals. So if your belief that's been holding you back so far is that selfishness is inherently bad, then the belief you need to reach your goal is that selfishness is sometimes good. Selfishness is necessary at times. Sometimes you need to look after yourself first and foremost so that you can bring your best self to the world. And that's a huge thing for therapists, people in the therapeutic community. And that's why in psychotherapy, I don't know if it's a rule, but it's some level of a rule where you need to have your own therapist and you need to do your own treatment if you're treating people. And there aren't the same, I don't think there's the same culture of it in physical therapies, but all the best therapists I know invest in looking after themselves, because you need to be in the best state possible to be able to help people, because if you're drained, if you're in bits, if you're not doing well, it's very hard to really help people. So you can go through these questions. Again, they're in the resources section. I personally find it best to write these answers by hand versus typing. There's some research on the benefits of physically writing versus typing. I'm not sure what the mechanism of that is, but in any case, writing or typing is going to be beneficial, even speaking it. Really what you're looking to do is you're looking to deepen your understanding of how your mind works. And once you identify the things that are holding you back, you can better navigate your life and avoid these self-sabotaging behaviors. And to be clear, now this can take a long time. You may need to work through these things several times over weeks, months, or perhaps years. It really depends. I've probably been doing this kind of work for close to 3 years. And for me, it's largely just about personal development. I've just gotten really, really interested in this kind of stuff and how the mind works, and just noticing how you create your reality through the beliefs that you have. And I find it fascinating. And so I'm still working on that. And the way I see it is that I'll likely be working on this for the rest of my life. And that doesn't mean that it takes all that time to get better. But I think it's part of self-care. It's part of, if you think stretching is is it good for self-care, then this is equally good or likely better. It's like eating healthy, it's like living a healthy life. It's a lifelong effort. So that's it for this episode. I hope it was thought-provoking and that it's going to help you better understand all the micro decisions and interactions in your life and how they shape who you are, and ultimately how these are governed by your beliefs about yourself and your beliefs about life and your beliefs about pain. You're going to find that if you take the time to delve into these questions, you'll learn a lot about yourself, and you'll greatly improve the quality of your life and the opportunities in your life. And I think that was the major thing for me. I took care of a lot of really significant mental blocks and limiting beliefs, but now it's just working on things just to make my life more enjoyable, so you can be more detached, more kind of, you can simply observe and not be, we use the word triggered a lot nowadays, and I kind of make fun of that, but it is true. You kind of, things affect you in an irrational way even if you don't show it externally, and your ability to simply just observe and notice different sides of the argument, again, which is so relevant nowadays. Everything's so polarizing. We're being divided by the media, we're being divided by political parties and all sorts of nefarious influences, and it's so crucial to be able to just detach and not be emotionally invested in all these things, because all of these things, they play on your biases, on your limiting beliefs, they play on your fears. So if you can recognize these, you can basically be a better human. That's what I love about this stuff. You will become a better person, a better human. You will have a better life if you invest in this work. And it might get worse before it gets better. It can be tough, but ultimately it's so worth it. I can't recommend it enough. I can't put it into words. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found that thought-provoking. Now, one more thing, my quick pitch. I'm opening up my complete back pain relief program again in the coming weeks. So it's on the 28th of April. We're starting the next phase. I'm opening that up for 10 people. The guarantee is simple. If you want to be pain-free in 8 weeks, check it out, because you will be pain-free in 8 weeks or your money back. And that's my guarantee. You're going to love the course. It's this times 100. It's really going deep in this kind of stuff, and it's really structured, and I'm there the whole way, and we've got a community, and we're going to help you, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get you from being in pain to not being in pain. It's that simple. So yeah, there's a link for that in the description and in the resources. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're using the podcast app, as always, let me know if you have any questions, suggestions, or constructive criticisms. I love to hear those. I want to make this as good as possible. I want to answer your questions. So let me know what I can do better. Be sure to smash that like button. I'm working on my YouTube, my podcast lingo, my personality. So be sure to smash that like button, and follow the Back Pain Coach on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. Subscribe on the podcast apps. Sign up to the newsletter. And please share this episode with anyone in need. And that's the thing. You'll have seen these patterns. You'll have seen these things in someone you know and someone you care about. And sometimes it's easier to give them, something to show them rather than tell them. It can be hard to confront someone with the ways in which they might be sabotaging their own well-being. So, put it on me. I'll say it to them. Send them this episode, and I will give them this information. Hopefully they can take it on board, and their life will be better, and you will be an integral part of improving the life of someone you love. So thank you so much for listening, if you've listened this far, and have a great day.